And because there's all the ways on social media where you then monetize your channel. I've had several students pay their way through college, all this stuff just through their social media things, and getting on Pandora and all these different streaming kind of platforms. It's very, very easy to do that. But that's part of step number one, is learning about the business and all of the avenues that you have to do before you finally do it.
I'm Mark Cook, president of Windfall Partners. We get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. After turnarounds as chief executive, the largest ever studies of award-winning leaders, a New York Times bestseller, and 5-star keynotes. I've coached 4,000 client wins at top brands. My Bold Encounters is an advanced system for leading. First, powerful steps on a path forward. Second, problem-solving skills that beat obstacles fast. Now, lead with Bold Encounters today.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's probably not a lot of that going on in your life. I remember back then you were starting out in your own career life, and it was very clear to you, we even picked up on it, that was a somewhat temporary stop in beginning your adult life and your work life. So tell us how you got into music first before you pivoted and went a different direction on the other side of it. So tell us how you started performing and why you fell in love, and tell us about the early part of your career.
Well, I think I must have had some natural abilities. There was this one lady at church that said, as a little toddler, I'd stand on the church and and sing the songs and stuff like that. So, yeah. But I had my dad. My parents loved music. They weren't terribly musical themselves. My dad had a nice voice, but he never got developed. He was a big Frank Sinatra fan. But he grew up during the Depression. I mean, really an interesting story that, he started earning money from the time he was like 8 years old, and all the money he ever gave to his family. He remembered his dad getting a box of apples and standing on the street corner and selling them, and whatever he made, that's what the family lived on for the week. And I mean, so really hard upbringing and such. And he loved to sing, and he had a nice voice, but just he was always trying to make money for things and never could really develop that. And my mom grew up on a farm in Idaho. Her dad was 9 when she died. The family couldn't afford lessons, so she loved music, took some old piano books, kind of taught herself how to play piano a little bit. But anyway, so they decided that we weren't going to have the lack of opportunity they did. So I had 4 brothers, and it was kind of like, okay, you're born, what instrument are you going to play? And she used to brainwash us with stuff like, a house is not a home without a piano in it, and things like that. So because I had a little bit of an aptitude, when I was 3, she got me lined up with this other little 3-year-old girl in church, and we used to go around singing in churches and rest homes. And by the time I was 5, I was singing the harmony, and the girl was singing the melody.
Wow.
When I was 5, she sat me down and showed me the notes on the piano and sent me down the street to this old lady's house to learn how to play piano. And I loved music and I loved the piano. I just didn't want to play these stupid songs she wanted me to play. So I'd come home and I'd practice like 2 or 3 minutes, just long enough to fake her out that I'd practiced. And then I'd sit around for hours listening to the radio or to records, trying to figure out what they were doing. So I kind of learned to play by ear instead of by notes. And my attitude was like, why should I take all the time to read all those notes when I can just make it up and it sounds better anyway? So when I was 7, I wrote my first song. I wanted to be a pop star. And as I told you before, I'm a year younger than Michael Jackson and Donny Osmond. So I kind of grew up seeing them, thinking, oh, I could be famous like them. And I wrote my first song when I was 7. It was about how, it was called Many a Time. I still remember it. It was about how I was sitting on the beach crying because my girlfriend left me. Because that's the stuff that's on the radio, right? So I was going to be this pop star. I had 2 older brothers. The oldest one was a drummer. The second one was a piano player, and they were considerably older than I was. One was 13, one was 9 when I was born. And so they used to play up in Park City. They used to play for dinner, music, and dancing. And so they had trouble getting bass players. The bass player they used ended up becoming the musical director for the Osmonds. And anyway, so I was pretty musical and fairly talented, so my brother thought, well, you could probably play bass. So I started playing bass in the school orchestra in 3rd grade. And so when I turned 10, they started using me as their bass player in the band. And we used to play all these jazz standards. I played a big upright bass, and I stood on a Coke case to be able to reach the top of the bass. Got big blisters on my fingers, and then I'd like poke them and get all the pus out. And but I made like $20 a night. And got a free dinner every night and all the root beer I could drink, and think, oh, this is a great life, and I could make money. In fact, other than teaching religious instruction for a short time, the only money I've ever made has been through music. I've been really fortunate that way. So I just kind of grew up in that situation, and I think I was pretty talented, and I was born in a musical family, and so I had a lot of help, like you had as an athlete. You had older brothers that were, athletes, and so you probably gave you an advantage as a kid over other kids that were just trying to figure it out. So I had all of that, and I got lots of opportunities to perform. I put my first group together when I was in 5th grade for the school talent show, and I taught everybody how to play. My first instrument was piano when I was 5, bass when I was 9, I got a guitar when I was 10, and a drum set when I was 12, and then in junior high I just got instruments and figured out how to play them, and so I taught my friends one song, and I taught them all each how to play the thing, and we played for the school talent show, and we won the school talent show. So, and then all through junior high and high school, I got an electric bass, and we started playing for dances and parties all through junior high and high school, and so I was pretty much set that I was going to be a musician because that's the family I kind of grew up in. If your family owns car dealerships, you'll probably go into cars or something. So. So I had kind of planned my life doing that. I got a degree in music in jazz composition, and then headed down to Los Angeles. And that was kind of where my big break came from. I kind of decided, even though I had sung a lot, I really wasn't a singer. I had a good ear, could sing harmony, but I just was not blessed with a great voice. I just didn't have that talent. I started recording songs, and I could play all the instruments, and I'd record, and everything would sound great, and then I'd add my voice, and I'd think, oh, my voice is terrible, and why isn't my voice better? And I didn't take lessons because all you could do was opera, and I didn't want to sound like an opera singer. But anyway, my big break came when there was a really, really famous, and I think in anybody's business life, there is this business big break that you get, and you kind of have to be ready for it. And a lot of times you don't even realize that it's happening at the moment. You don't realize it till after. But anyway, this guy was a really, really famous voice teacher down in Los Angeles. He worked with Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson, Bernadette Peters, Barbra Streisand, everybody that was anybody he worked with down there. And he happened to come to Salt Lake City to do some workshops. And because I could transpose on site, in other words, I could play a song and they'd say play it in a different key, I could play it in a different key. And he needed that because he wanted to be able to change keys for people. So I followed him around for 4 days, and whenever he needed a piano player, I'm so old that I'm pre-karaoke. We didn't have karaoke. We had live piano players. So I would play, and then, so after it was all over, he said, what are you doing with your life? And I said, well, I'm just graduating from the university. And he says, well, let me know. He said, have you ever thought about coming to Los Angeles? And I thought, yes, every musician thinks about going to Los Angeles. But I didn't really know. And he said, well, let me know when you're ready, and I'll see what I can do for you. And I thought, yeah, I've heard that before. I was playing at the Room at the Top downtown, and there was a guy that told me he was Steven Spielberg's brother, and I was really good, and he was going to do this and this. So I'd had people promise me things before, so I didn't really think of it. Anyway, about 3 months later, I got a phone call, picked it up. It was this guy from LA. He said, hey, Dean, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm just graduating like next week. And he said, I need a piano player. And it turned out that his last piano player, there was a guy named John Davidson that was a famous singer years ago that was on the road. And he was in Lake Tahoe, and his musical director got sick. Basically, all famous entertainers have a music director, either a guitar player or piano player. Usually they kind of take care of the band, organize everything so that the singer can just sing. And so as I thought about it, I thought that's really where my talents lie. I'm not a singer, I'm not a Michael Jackson, I'm not a dancer, but I could be a musical director. So that's what I think. I could be a songwriter, I could write hit songs, I could do that kind of thing. So anyway, this John Davidson was on the road, his musical director got sick, and so he called Seth and he says, hey, I need your piano player. And so he went up and did the gig, and then the old musical director decided not to come back, and so this guy stayed as a musical director. So Seth said, I need a piano player. So I'm in a perfect situation to do what I thought I was going to do. I thought I was going to go down there, meet these famous people I was playing with. I was playing for the voice lessons of all these famous people. I was working with a girl that had been a backup singer for Stevie Wonder. She was going on her own. He had actually sang on her debut album to help her, a guy that had been a backup singer for Kenny Rogers. But all these people were talking about being on the road 12 months out of the year. And for some reason I had wanted kids since I was 14. I don't know why. I just really looked forward to having kids and being a dad. And I thought, I really don't want to be on the road all my life. And I don't want to just like try and raise my kids on a bus or just pop in once a month and see how they're doing. Again, I was single at the time, but I was kind of trying to think ahead. And I didn't really like Los Angeles. And I thought, what am I doing here? And just so anyway, I had this job offer before I left to teach religious instruction in high school. And it was kind of on the back burner. And I thought, well, I'll go home and take that. And again, thinking that when I was leaving LA, I was giving up on my dream, and I didn't know where my life was. I knew I'd always be involved with music in some way because it had been a part of my life. But I thought, well, maybe I'll be a teacher. And like I said, coming full circle, I'm in a position of helping people, but in a different way. So anyway, so I did that, and I was got married and had a couple of kids, and I was doing music on the side. And it got to a point where I was making more money part-time with music on the side than I was full-time teaching religious instruction. And so it was a really tough time. It was like, because I loved being with the kids and working with them and all that. I loved that, but I thought, well, maybe I'll have a chance to chase my dream and do music. And so I started doing music full-time. And that was a big, scary moment from a business thing.
Yeah.
Even though I was making my first contract, and again, this is 40 years ago, but it was $13,000 a year. And I remember thinking, if I can make $30,000 a year, I'll be rich. I remember specifically thinking that. But I was already making more part-time. But I was giving up insurance and guaranteed paycheck. And so it was a big, scary move to do that. And originally in the music business, you kind of do what you do in any business. You just kind of do whatever you can to survive. So I was teaching some guitar, I was teaching some piano, I was recording jingles, I was trying to do my own albums and get those to a distributor and get those sold and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, I had some people that wanted me to help them with voice. And I thought, oh, no, I'm not a singer, because I thought you have to have a great voice to be a singer. But then I used to play piano for this guy that was like the best singer in Utah. He was in all the shows, and he was the most expensive voice teacher in town. And as I played for him, I realized he knew absolutely nothing about teaching voice. He just had a great voice. So I think that there's some advantage to saying, sound like me, whoa, but he couldn't really help people. And so I thought, well, I can help people because there's rarely a problem that comes through the door that I didn't personally experience. So I started doing some favors for friends and friends of friends with music. And plus they knew that I'd worked with this real famous voice teacher. And again, when I was working with him, I after a while I said, hey, will you teach me? So I think this is the point where this was that mentor in my life that didn't know he was a mentor, but you kind of need that moment that kind of just happened. And he'd rather teach me than pay me, so he thought he was getting a good deal on the thing. So I'd learn all this stuff, but I would sit in there and I was really watching him when he would teach. And I would get to a point where I'd say, okay, he's going to stop him here, he's going to tell him to do this. And when I got where I was right, like 9 out of 10 times, I thought, okay, I think I know what I'm doing. So I was a little hesitant. I found myself apologizing for 2 years that I was a voice teacher.
Oh, no.
Because I didn't think I had a great voice, and I thought he had a great voice. But again, it occurred to me that there was rarely a vocal problem that came through the door that I hadn't personally experienced. In fact, as a kid growing up, I didn't take lessons, and I had all these bands, right? All through high school and college and even junior high. I was playing 3-4 times a week, and I was the lead singer of these bands, even though I wasn't a singer, and we had terrible PA systems so you couldn't hear yourself. And all I knew is that if I yelled louder, I got a higher note. And so I'd sing for a 3-hour gig and go, wow, that's really fun, because I just screamed for 3 hours, right? So by the time I was 18, my goal vocally was to be able to go, ah, because I couldn't. If I tried to do a scale, I'd go like, ah, and nothing would come out. So I'm sure I'd severely damaged my voice, although I didn't know enough about it at the time. So like I said, I was kind of apologizing that I was a teacher at first, but it also made me really interesting on how does the voice work and why am I having these problems and why don't I sound good and everything else is good. So anyway, that kind of gave me confidence. But anyway, by doing these favors for friends of friends of friends, all of a sudden I had a waiting list of students that wanted to work with me. So I thought I got to take this seriously. So anyway, originally I was just doing all these things, and it was just everything was really too busy. And then finally, let's go about 10 years down the road. So I was doing all these things and was really busy and being, somewhat successful. But anyway, I talked to a couple of people that I thought, these are really successful people. And I asked them a question, and this was a significant question in my life. I said, okay, do you think it's better to be pretty good at lots of things or really good at one thing? Because I'd always kind of taught to be well-rounded, you know, and I did sports and I did music and I was pretty smart, but I didn't really necessarily focus on any one thing. I was trying to do all of it at the same. And even in music, even though I was doing music, I was doing everything in music and I wasn't focusing. And all of these people that I taught to, without hesitation, they'd say, it's best to be really good at one thing. And I had always kind of prided myself in that I was pretty good at lots of things.
Yeah.
And they said, and I said, really, why? And they said, because if you're pretty good at lots of things, that means that you've failed at lots of things. Mm. And I don't know if I fully agree with that. However, that made a big impact on me. And so I looked at my life at that time, and part of it was that my kids were just growing up way too fast. And again, I had kind of given up my whole LA dream for my kids originally, and even though I was coaching them in sports and I was trying to be around and I was self-employed, so I still just felt like, wow, they're just growing up way too fast. And so what I decided to do is I thought to myself, is there something I can be the best in the world at? And I thought, yeah, I could be one of the best voice teachers in the world. First of all, I studied with this guy that was really groundbreaking in what he was doing, and I learned from him. And I had some I had a skill that people really wanted. And I don't want to get technical about the voice, but one of the very first articles I wrote for a magazine was called The Great Lie. And in voice, we're kind of taught that we have a low voice and a high voice, and they sound totally different, and you can't really, the best you can do is kind of sneak from one to another, kind of an idea. And this guy was teaching that that's not true. And so what we did was really, really unique. We called it connecting up the bridges or connecting the voice, so that you can sing with one voice from your bottom to the top without having different voices, or making
without a falsetto.
Yeah, without making your high voice different than the low voice, or without yelling and screaming and hurting your voice, all this kind of stuff. So there was a real special skill that at the time was, in fact, we took a lot of criticism, people saying, oh, that's impossible, because everybody was teaching something else. So I think that was a really, really key issue. I was there at the beginning, and now in the world, pretty much everybody teaches this. So I think that in some small way, we've had a big difference on the vocal world and vocal community in general, but it was...
You were a pioneer in getting the range
a little bit, yeah.
broader,
and again, he was the guy.
One of them.
But but then we also...
And doesn't it protect your voice too?
Yeah, and I've never had a student in 40 years, over 40 years, hurt their voice at all, and yet I've actually helped people rehab from surgeries and vocal problems and stuff like that, just understanding it. And so I realized at that time that I had a lot of skills that helped me as a voice teacher. A lot of voice teachers they haven't lived in LA, they don't play piano, they don't have a lot of this experience in the music business. And most of my students, they want to work on their voice, but they're also trying to build careers and be successful, and so I understand a lot of that. And I realized that I had a lot of these skills that if I put them together, this was a thing that I could maybe be one of the best in the world at. And so I stopped doing everything else and focused on that. And that was 25 years ago, where I just really focused on that one thing. And then that's, I think, particularly when things really kind of took off. But anyway, that's sort of the long and the short of it.
You helped some of the best people in the world at it.
And through that, it's worked out to be wonderful to work with some really talented and great people, and have some really wonderful experiences and help people develop their talents. But it is interesting story. Because and I never really thought of this until you wanted to interview, and I thought full circle back to, and I thought, well, I don't know, maybe that's, my thing was just, how can I help people? In fact, when I first started teaching voice, I wasn't prepared for this, because I wasn't expected for like a lot of competition and like bad talking. But in the vocal world, and I'm sure it's like this in a lot of different worlds, but it was like, the attitude was like, oh, don't study with that person, they'll ruin their voice, you have to study with me. And it was like trying to talk down everybody else. Oh, they don't know what they're doing, they're going to ruin your voice, you got to work with me, all this kind of stuff. And I was never that way.
Yeah.
Like someone would come to me and I'd say, you don't really need me. I'm kind of expensive, and so you could work with that person. They're closer. They'll help you. And that was just all new to people that
That you're just
I was
willing.
honestly concerned for that person. And my attitude was always like, okay, I'd never planned on being a voice teacher, but these people are asking me and I'm helping them and I'm enjoying helping them. And when they stop asking me, I'll do something else. Maybe I'll get back to other things that I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
But they just keep asking. In fact, I've been trying to retire for about 6 years and they just keep asking. And
Yeah, we won't put an ad on this episode like we do everyone else. We'll say, don't call him. We've taken a lot of your time this morning, and I want to be respectful of your time. But I do have just a few more questions that I want to ask you. I want to ask you a question about singers that you've worked with that have really made it, and then the vocal coaching too. So on the singing side, you've worked with thousands of people that are trying to make it. If you told us about your mentor, but if you had to give them maybe your top 3 priorities for what they should do as a not famous, not making money yet person, trying to make it as a singer in the world of modern music or whatever genre it is, what are the top 3 pieces of advice as steps and accomplishments?
Well, the first one, I think it's right into business too. One of the biggest problems I have with students is that they come with the idea of wanting to become famous. Just because of the reality shows and all this thing, people become famous. And so becoming famous is a big deal. And the more important thing is to develop your talents and be the most talented person you can be. And if your goal is to become the best singer or the best songwriter or the best piano player, that's your goal, then success will follow. So I didn't start out to try to become a world famous voice teacher. I just wanted to be a really good voice teacher and help people. And when you're really good at stuff, then people find you and things develop. So I think that's a big thing, is that people come from the backwards. It's kind of like, oh, I want to be on TV, I want to be famous. Instead of thinking, I want to develop my abilities and become really, really good at that. So along with that same line, you have to decide, what are you really good at? And what's your sound? And what's your image? And who's your audience? And what does your audience want? So all those things are very business thing.
And be very best at that
and
one.
be very best at that.
Yeah.
And so that's the key. And once you're good at that, then people will find you. The music business is way different than when I did it. When I did it, there were 7 major record labels, and you would just try to get known by a record label, and they would invest time in you. Everybody now is their own record label. And so, because there's the internet and stuff, I mean, everybody can record on their computer and put stuff on the internet. They can video themselves. So in some ways that's good, in some ways that's bad. The good thing is that everybody can get in the music business now, whereas before it was only those that got acknowledged by a record label could get in the business. But the bad news is that everybody's in the music business now. Everybody thinks they're a singer and a performer. So it's kind of finding your niche, what you're really good at, and doing that. Now, along those same lines, and again, this is kind of a business thing too, I think it's really important as a business person to be honest about your worth. Again, my dad always got mad at me, said I gave too many things away. At the end of the day, I think some of those things, that attitude has helped me and come back to be good. But also, people judge your ability on how much you charge. And not that I agree with that, but if I'm a voice teacher and I'm charging $10 a lesson,
you're no good.
People are going, oh, well, he must not be very good, but that's all I can afford.
Amen.
If I'm a voice teacher and I'm charging $400 a lesson, they go, wow, that guy must be really good. I can't afford him. So I think you want to be honest about your abilities in it. But I think that that's a really important thing, is to not cut. So, and for years I did that. I kind of sold myself short. I was way undercharging, and again, my dad would get really mad at me. But again, because my attitude, yes, I wanted to support myself and support my family, but that wasn't my main goal. My main goal was to help people and find joy in helping them be successful. I developed talents. I wanted to help them develop talents, and so seeing success through their eyes. And again, that was a tough point for me to say, okay, I'm not going to be the star that I thought I was going to be. I'm going to be behind the scenes guy. But now, my success is kind of like when you become a parent a little bit. My success is in seeing my kids succeed or that. And so that attitude. So anyway, I think that's really important as far as valuing what you do, and because you got to support yourself. Unfortunately, most people I know that are doing music are doing it as a really expensive hobby. And this is one thing I don't like about the American system, is that you're working a real job to earn money so that you can do what you really want to do. But again, I think, as I mentioned to you earlier, there's a lot of people that go around to college people that are graduating and say, find your passion and go after your passion. And my attitude is slightly different than that. I think it is find what you're really good at, find what people need and want that you can offer, and get passionate about that. And if you can find something like that, then I think that you have a good chance of being successful. And I think right now, the attitude with kids as far as like, I want to become famous, it's sort of like kids a lot of times getting into the business world. It's like, they go into a business interview and it's like, how much can you pay me? How much time off can I get? It's like they're looking for, as opposed to, I really want to create something of value, or what does the world need? And what can I provide the world? What skills do I have? And again, as I looked at myself and thinking, okay, yes, I've got all these abilities and things that I would like to do, but they all lead toward this thing, and this is available to me, and I can be successful at that. So I think in the long run, those are the things that are kind of important.
So find what you're best at, become very best at it before trying to find all the followers. And then what is a third one? Is there a third thing that a young singer that wants to be able to feed their family or make a living and be successful singing, what you would have them do practically as a step?
Yeah, I actually think that there were several steps probably in that. First of all is, let's say as a singer that you're going, you have to, again, establish your sound. That was one thing I didn't do. I liked all types of music. I have 7 CDs, they're all different. And I didn't really have anybody guiding me in that. Had I done it differently, I would have said, this is my sound. And I would try to focus that as much as possible. And this is what I want to do, and this is my audience, and this is how I'm going to reach them. All those ways. And it's not necessarily the most talented all the time. Obviously, someone's kind of got to get a big break. Life in general is all about marketing, and the music business has always been about marketing, but now it's more than ever. So it's not necessarily, and especially with technology the way it is, you look back at the 70s and there were some amazing musicians, and everything that you hear that they did, they actually did. But so much of what happens today is electronically generated. You don't even really have to be that great of a musician. You just have to have a good idea of a sound that people like and want, and be good at getting that together. And then getting good at getting that out to people. That marketing aspect of it. So, creative marketing campaigns, how to reach people. And if you can't do that yourself, you need to surround yourself with people that can do that. And so that's, I think, one of my problems as an artist was trying to do it all on my own because I could, but I think that I wasn't as good at some things as other people. And that's what the record labels used to be able to do. They'd say, okay, we're going to put you with a songwriter and a costume person and a publicity person and line you up with all these expert people. And so if you realize that there's something that you're not very good at or someone's better at, if you can involve that person in what you're doing. But it's all about social media now. It's just blowing up on social media. So it's all content, and you're going to invest a bunch of time into this before you see any success from it. So become and again, as a voice teacher, I found that I had lots of skills that were helpful as a voice teacher. But again, as an artist, if there's some skills that you're missing, either in marketing or video or appearance or stage presence or any of that kind of stuff. But America it's a land of opportunity, but it's a little weird right now. It's not necessarily the most talented. It's just who has something that's interesting, that's unique, that's different, that could catch people's attention, who has the personality.
let me
Yeah.
sneak one other question in on this
So I
before I
think
let you go.
there's several things there. I don't know how to break them down exactly into all of
No,
that.
that was good.
But you have to have you develop your talent, but you also have to have an interesting sound, something that's unique,
Yeah.
something that stands out that makes people go, oh, that's interesting. It's almost more important to be interesting than to be good.
The X factor, your particular version of that X
Yeah,
factor.
yeah.
What before I leave the singer side, tell me quick. It's if I'm not mistaken, they start making money not on the followers and the advertising from Google, but they have to go out and perform and sell tickets now. It used to be the opposite a little bit in music. So, in your experience, what a new musician who's trying to sing, how do they do that if they're not Ticketmaster's best friend and they have to be entrepreneurial about it, independent kind of?
I am amazed how many different ways there is to make money nowadays. It's way easier than it used to be. When I was doing concerts, which I was at one time, to get an ad in the weekend paper for a Saturday, Sunday, for a little 5x7 ad was $3,000.
Yeah.
And this was 30 years ago. That was a lot of money. Hoping people would see it. You would get posters and put those up. You would buy radio airtime and you'd get a radio sponsor. And all of this was really expensive. And then you'd get a venue and you'd advertise it and do all this kind of stuff and just hope that people would buy tickets and show up. So it took a lot of money to do all that stuff. So about 5 years ago, again, I hadn't performed since about 2000. So about 2019 or something, I pulled out one of my Christmas CDs. It was sort of like a jazz Mannheim Steamroller Christmas CD that we had done. And again, I was promoting myself back then. I was doing concerts, trying to sell CDs, all that kind of stuff. And I hadn't done it for 19 years or so. And I was listening and I thought, this music is really good. It would be fun to play this again. And so I had actually a student. There's a guy named Lex Diazevedo who's a pretty famous musician, and he had a big studio. And I happened to be teaching 2 of his grandkids. And so I said, hey, can I use your studio for a concert? It holds about 300 people. He said, yeah, sure. So I had my daughter do a Facebook little mock-up about Dean Kaelin concert, one night only. And again, I hadn't performed for 19 years. I called up the musicians, said, are you guys all available on this night? Yeah, sure. We said, okay, all you do is it's going to be $10. You just pay on PayPal. We'll leave your name at the door. It sold out in 4 days. It was like the easiest thing I had ever done in my life. And I thought, wow. The internet was just sort of starting in 2000 when I was just sort of ending my career as a performer.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is so easy. Now, obviously, you got to have a good sound stuff. Okay, so what I tell my singers is that there's a triangle. There's 5 steps. Okay, you like steps. Here's steps.
I do.
The first thing you got to do is you got to develop your talent. So that means you learn to play guitar, learn to play piano, learn to songwrite, learn to sing, all those kinds of things. All the skills. Learn to record.
Yeah.
Learn to video. Anything. All those skills. Learn about marketing. All that stuff. This is all the learning phase here that you want to get into, and that usually washes most people out. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing you have to do is you have to define your product. Okay, so it's like what's my sound? What do I want to do? All that kind of stuff, and they sort of take a while to kind of develop all that. And then you enter this triangle, steps 3, 4, and 5, that become the pyramid that goes the rest of your life. Number 3 is you have to find or write great songs. So you have to get material. Okay. Number 4 is that you have to get that recorded. And number 5 is that you have to perform that. So performing can be either on the internet, social, or live. Doesn't matter, okay? And they work with each other. Now that 3, 4, and 5 just become this pyramid that go the rest of your life. Katy Perry, when she came out, she was the first person ever to have 5 number ones on one album. First time it ever happened. But as soon as those 5 number ones are gone, she's just a has-been that hasn't done anything for a while. So she's got to come up with new material again. Find or write great material, get it recorded, then perform it. So when you get big, you make a social media presence, and then that turns into live performances because people find out about it. And your live performances, you're telling about your social media, trying to build that. And it's a whole kind of a secret thing as far as getting some material. You want to be releasing stuff every, well, you know this from your podcast here. You got to be releasing stuff every like 3 weeks, or else people forget who you are, right? Yeah. You can't just do one thing and then wait a year. So it's a good idea to kind of do all this stuff first and then just release it strategically and do that. Now the nice thing about it is that sometimes it takes a while to kind of to build momentum and all that. But what you're really waiting for is something that all of a sudden goes viral and you get like a million hits, a million views. Then you're in. And now, because there's all the ways on social media where you then monetize your channel. I've had several students pay their way through college, all this stuff just through their social media things, and getting on Pandora and all these different streaming kind of platforms. It's very, very easy to do that. But that's part of step number one, is learning about the business and all of the avenues that you have to do before you finally do it. But like I said, it's so much easier now than it was when I was doing it, because back then it was like the label did all of that and you were just one little cog that they thought,
you
okay,
had to wait for them.
Yeah, and you had to try to get discovered. Whitney Houston, one of the greatest singers ever, she was singing in church, and the guys in church said, hey, you're really good. And so they basically did a showcase for her and invited record labels. Nobody came. So I mean, she was no different than the rest of us, just trying to get the interest of people like that. Now once you got in, then you had all these people that were really good at all these things that did that for you. And now you don't have that anymore. You got to do it all yourself. Yeah. But anybody that wants to can do that. And there's just, like I said, so many ways to make money. Just little things like that. Like I said, monetizing your channel. You get so many views. I hate all the little commercials on YouTube, but that lets you know that, ooh, this person's getting some money off of every time you look at what they're doing. It is kind of cool. And so I haven't really ever, like I said, the internet was just happening when I was just going down with my career. But it is cool, everyone. I did throw up some of my stuff on the internet over the years, and I haven't really tried to promote it or anything. But every once in a while, I'll get an email from someone in New Zealand or something. Oh, we sang your song, or we're using your, you know, and it's just cool to think, okay, people are finding it. So, in retirement, that's what I was going to kind of go back to my career and maybe do more of that. And I haven't done it yet. I'm still kind of doing the teaching thing.
Next year.
I've done it. It was cool. I did an orchestration a couple years ago, and they performed it down at a Bravenel Hall, and it was kind of cool just to sit out in the audience and hear something that I had composed and arranged, and have these people, this orchestra, this choir, these soloists, everybody singing something that I had done. That's pretty thrilling.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. So, and originally that's, like I said, where I was starting to go, and now I'm kind of coming back to that a little bit. I've been invited to do a couple things, but again, the career kind of took off in the meantime and provided me with a lot of opportunities.
Well, and that leads me to my last question, because one of the other places you've rippled is you have taught all these people how to coach, and you've had kind of a multiplier effect with other people, including my own wife, Nika, and her vocal academy. So if you wanted to tell someone who has a vocal coaching or a vocal academy business, what are the few things that must be done really well to have it maximize success?
As a voice teacher
a
starting
coach.
a studio?
Yeah. Well, not just brand new starting, but you know, you've taught a couple of students and you've got people that want to take. What's next? What are the big 3 important things to take it to the moon?
I would say, number one, you have to understand what's needed. So if I teach someone, like for example, someone that's wants to do musical theater, it wouldn't matter to me if you walked through the door and you wanted to sing opera or heavy metal or anything in between. I would teach you the same technique. Good singing is good singing. However, how you apply that is totally different, because the sound, so the direction of your energy is very different. So, I mean, you could specialize and just say, okay, this is what I do. I do this one thing. But if you're not going to do that, you need to understand each of those different genres. You need to understand, okay, this is heavy metal, this is country, this is rock and roll, this is musical theater, this is opera, because they all demand different things. So you can either specialize and say, okay, this is what I work with, and let's do that. But otherwise, you're just going to be messing people up. So you got to understand, okay, what is it that? So you got I guess the idea is start with the end in mind. You have to understand what does this person need to be when they get to that point so they can get the gig, okay? And whether that's in Broadway or in pop or rock and roll, okay? So you understand that whole thing, what's necessary, first of all. Because if you don't, it's just like the blind leading the blind. You're just singing songs and you're not really helping them because they're not getting anywhere. So to me, it's always like, okay, this is where the person is. What skills do they need to get to that point, and how can I get them to that point? So the first thing is to understand what's needed, okay? The second thing is maybe the most important is like, what is deficient in that person right now? In other words, what's keeping them from being successful? And whether that's in sports or, I'm helping coach football again. My son's a head football coach, and so I volunteered. So I'm working with the quarterbacks. We started just with throwing motion. I mean, we started just very simple because, because they were throwing, and it just was not,
Throwing baseballs.
Yeah, they're throwing baseballs instead of footballs and stuff. So anyway, so you got to say, okay, this is what's missing in the voice. This is what they're not doing correctly. Then that's probably the most important thing. And then eventually it's like, okay, what can I give them that will fix that thing? And so, otherwise it's kind of like, oh, well, here's some exercises. Let's sing some songs. Oh, that was fun. Okay, give me $10 and have a nice day. You're not really helping them. And again, I think these principles apply to anything. And like I said, whether it's, life instruction or, whatever, you have to understand, the business. And that's why I think a lot of times.
What the person really needs. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's why a lot of people end up doing what their family business is, whether it's the car business or the furniture business or the entertainment business. They just kind of grow up in there because they understand it. It's interesting that there's a lot of people from Canada and the UK, particularly Canada. There's an amazing amount of Canadians that are successful in the entertainment business in the United States.
Wow.
And but population-wise, it's a very small percentage. But you look at how many Canadians have been successful in the entertainment business and why. I finally talked to a woman that had been a producer in Canada and in the UK. She says, because we have a developmental program. Basically, they have Canadian Broadcasting Network, and they control everything. And they have the BBC, the British Broadcasting Network. And so they basically find young talent and develop it. We don't have anything like that in America. Everybody's developing themselves. And so by the time a Michael J. Fox came from Canada to America, he'd already been on all these shows. He already knew how to act. So even though he was only a teenager, he had had all of this life experience. So it gave him a real head start when he came down here. And that happens with a lot from Canada and the UK. The only thing we have similar is we had Disney. And if you look at how many successful people came out of Disney, Olivia Rodrigo included, Christina Aguilera, Justin Timberlake, I mean, go down they all got into it because they got into this little developmental program, so they kind of grew up in it. And how many actors are actors because their parents were directors, they grew up in it. So by the time other people turn 16 and decide, ooh, I want to go in that business, they're already like 15 years behind because this person has grown up in it and they understand the business and they've already been making those connections, which is what's happened to sports, which I hate. When I was a kid, you played whatever sport was in season. Now you got to decide when you're 7 what sport you're going to play, and you play it year round and you travel. And because if you don't, then all the other kids are like way ahead of you.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think that's a lot of it. It's just understanding that process and going into it. So anyway.
Well, we've taken your time, and
I hope that was something of worth it.
Yeah, it was terrific.
But it is interesting, as we've
great.
talked, though, how similar everything kind of is, at least in my opinion, whether
helping
it's
people,
teaching voice or business or developing or coaching sports or teaching or raising kids. And there's so many principles that are all kind of similar. And I don't know that I really, I guess I kind of knew it, but I don't know that I ever really realized it until I started putting all these aspects in my life together, trying to figure out what my motivation is. I do want to say one other thing, though.
Please.
And to me, this is really important. I remember a number of years ago, they did it had to have been a 10-page article in the newspaper about Larry Miller and his business and success. And he was great story. He started out working in a car business and then eventually put together a business and then eventually owned the Jazz and all that kind of stuff and all these car businesses all over. And they did this whole 10-page thing in the newspaper about him. And it was interesting because at the very end, the last question they asked him, and it seems to be always the question they ask successful people, they said, looking back, if you had to do anything different, would there be anything in your career that you would have done different? And usually they all say the same thing. They say, I would have spent more time with my kids. Now the interesting thing is, if they would have spent more time with their kids, they probably wouldn't be doing a 10-page article in the newspaper about them. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because we need people in the world that say, I'm going to discover these amazing new technologies that are going to benefit society, or these new medicines, and I'm going to focus my life on that too. But I also think that that's significant, at least in my life. And yeah, I mean, I was down at BYU one time, university fairly close to here, and I was watching Kenny Loggins in concert. And a guy was playing bass that I played with in LA. And I remember thinking, it'd be really cool being on stage with Kenny Loggins right now. I would have really enjoyed that. But I made a decision at one point on what's important. And it's still tough to think, when you see somebody do something really great and you go, that'd be fun to do it, they're on the Grammys or whatever. But kind of we make choices. And I've always thought that's really interesting that they never do an article with the guy that chose to, okay, I'm going to be a dad rather than this amazing businessman. And it's all, everything's kind of, life is a balancing act that way as well.
So what was your takeaway with Larry Miller?
But here's the same thing. They asked him if you had anything to do different, what would you do? He said, I would have spent more time with my kids. Yeah. That was his final, and they mostly say that. Jimmy Johnson was the first football coach that ever won an NCAA title and a Super Bowl.
Sure.
And the first thing he did once he was hired as the head football coach of Dallas Cowboys is he divorced his wife so he could spend more time focusing on football. Mm. And he asked his kids said, we didn't know my dad, he was never home. He was never around.
It's impossible in that line of work.
Yeah, so I think that and then obviously that comes back to my studio, and I think about that, and I think when I played with some people, and fortunately, when I moved back from LA, I really thought, that's it. It was really tough. This is the end of my dream. And I've been really, really fortunate that it's kind of come full circle, that it's not the way I had intended it, but I've been able to stay in the music business and have some of those moments, not quite, because I'm not the performer on stage that I thought I was going to be. I'm the behind the scenes guy, coaching and getting people ready and kind of seeing their success. But I think that that's important too. I mean, because, and is it possibly successful in both? Yeah. But it kind of comes down to, is it better to be pretty good at lots of things or really good at one thing? The world will tell you it's just best to be really good at one thing in order to be really successful, whatever that is. But then, what's the rest of your life like? And I think you have to look at kind of life as a whole and say, what really brings happiness? Because obviously just a lot of money and a lot of fame and fortune obviously doesn't bring happiness. And to me, that's kind of been the bottom line is, how can we be happy and adjusted? And so I think some of those things about caring about people, and if those are your defining factors, I think you're going to be successful. And you may not be the richest person in the world, but I feel like I'm comfortable, and I've been real fortunate, and I'm very blessed with things. And yeah, I think I've worked hard, but the whole time of trying to keep things in balance, that's tough today. That's tough in the world in general.
Dean Kaelin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us to get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. You've heard a little bit about the power of bold encounters and leadership. Watch on. Go to full episodes with the iconic expert interviews at markspencercook.com/podcast. And please subscribe. My site takes you directly to YouTube video and podcast versions. Please make comments. Share this with your friends. Also, reach out to us to just brainstorm your priorities, challenges, events, or how bold encounters might help. Visit windfallpartners.com. Click the Let's Talk button without obligation and reach out. I look forward to speaking. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's lead with bold encounters today.